2025 by consolidating science and technology resources and creating a resource ecosystem and research-based economical foundation. Transforming Indonesia as a global reference in the development and application of science and technology practices and the good of humankind. Nature is the source of inspiration. Knowledge is the foundation, and to be put in praxis for the sake of the nation.
Honorable Chairman of Research Organization for Health, National Research and Innovation Agency of Republic of Indonesia. Honorable Head of Research Center for Public Health and Nutrition of BRIN. Honorable Speakers, Dr. Umi, Dr. Umi Farida, Dr. Kencana Sari, Dr. Profesor Daniel Bachman, Dr. Dia Sari. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and welcome to international webinar under the theme of From Evidence to Action Advancing Nutrition Science for Child Growth to the Thursday, June 11, 2026. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the national anthem of the Republic of Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, this webinar aims to bring together global and national experts to share research findings and also discuss current challenges and explore practical solutions. This webinar aims to connect global evidence, national insights, and field-level practices with focus on improving child growth outcomes through evidence-based approaches. Ladies and gentlemen, to officially open this webinar, please welcome Chairman of Research Organization for Health, who unfortunately cannot be with us in person And we'll give her speech through video messaging. Please welcome Professor Mila Putu Indi Damayanti. Enjoy.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and warm greeting to us all. Distinguished head of the research center under the Research Organization for Health, honorable speakers, Professor Dani Hoffman, Dr. Umi Fahmida, and Dr. Kencana Sari, esteemed participants joining us both on-site and online. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to welcome all of you to this international webinar entitled From Evidence to Action, Rethinking Nutrition Science for Child Growth. First and foremost, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to our speakers and all participants to joining this important scientific forum. Your presence reflect our shared commitment to advancing child nutrition, strengthening scientific collaboration, and translating research evidence into meaningful actions that improve public health outcomes. Child nutrition remains one of the most important public health priorities both globally and in Indonesia. Although Indonesia has made encouraging progress in reducing stunting over recent years, nutrition challenges continue to evolve and become increasingly complex. Today, we are facing the triple burden of malnutrition, in which undernutrition, micronutrient deficiencies, and overweight or obesity coexist simultaneously. In Indonesia, stunting remains an important concern despite continued progress. At the same time, we are witnessing a rise in the overweight and obesity across age groups alongside persistent micronutrients deficiencies, including anemia among adolescents, girls, and women. This condition not only affect growth and health in the present, but also influence educational attainment, productivity, and the quality of future human capital. Addressing these interconnected challenges therefore requires a comprehensive, evidence-based, and context-sensitive solution. At the same time, nutrition challenges today are shaped by a broader transformation, including changing food systems, urbanization, dietary transitions, socioeconomic disparities, and unequal access to quality nutrition and health services. These realities remind us that malnutrition is no longer a simple issue that can be solved through isolated intervention. Instead, it demands multi-sectoral collaboration, innovation, and stronger integration between scientific evidence and real-world implementation. As a research institution, BRIN has the important role in ensuring that scientific findings not only remains solely within academic discussion, but can contribute to policies, program, and practical intervention that benefit communities. The challenge before us is not only to generate evidence, but also to translate the evidence into action that are scalable, effective, and relevant to local contexts. In this spirit, today's webinar provides an important platform to scientific exchange and dialogue through discussion and reflection shared by our distinguished speakers. We hope to deepen our understanding to child growth and nutrition, strengthen collaboration among researchers and stakeholders, and identify innovative pathways for addressing the complex nutrition challenges we face today. I would also like to extend my appreciation to the organizing committee, particularly the Public Health and Nutrition Research Centers, for preparing this important event. I hope today's discussion will inspire new ideas, strengthen collaboration, and encourage us to translate scientific evidence into meaningful action to improving child growth and nutrition outcomes. I wish you all a productive and engaging discussion. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the welcoming remark, please welcome Head of Research Center for Public Health in Nutrition of BRIN. Please welcome Dr. Wahyu Puji Nugraini.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and warm greeting to everyone. Distinguished Head of the Health Research Organization, Professor Dr. Indi Darmayanti, respected Head of Research Group at the Research Center for Public Health and Nutrition, and all their civitas, esteemed speaker, Professor Daniel Hoffman, Dr. Insinyur Umi Fahmida, Dr. Kencana Sari, Honorable Moderator, Eva, and also fellow researcher, academic, development partner, student, and all participants joining us in the national webinar. First and foremost, let us express our sincere gratitude to Almighty God for His blessing and grace which have enabled us to gather today for this national webinar organized by Research Center for Public Health and Nutrition Health Research Organization BRIN under the theme From Evidence to Actions, Rethinking Nutrition Science for Child Growth. This theme reflects the critical need to bridge scientific evidence and practical action in addressing the nutritional challenges that continue to affect children worldwide, including in Indonesia. Despite significant advances in nutrition and health research, issues such as stunting, wasting, and overweight, and also obesity, as well as micronutrient deficiencies, remain major public health concerns that influence the health development and also future potential of children. We are honored to welcome a distinguished panel of experts who will share their valuable knowledge, experience, and perspective in the field of nutrition and public health. Our first speaker, Professor Daniel Hoffman, PhD from Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, will deliver a presentation entitled Managing the Triple Burden of Malnutrition, Global Strategies. His presentation will provide valuable global perspective on addressing the triple burden of malnutrition, which remain a significant challenge in many developing countries, including Indonesia. Our second speaker, Dr. Insinyur Umi Fahmida, MSc from the University of Indonesia, and Siameo Rekfon, will present innovative evidence-based approach for improving child growth in Indonesia. Her extensive contribution to nutrition research and intervention program in Indonesia will offer important insight into innovative and evidence-based strategies for improving child growth outcomes. Our third speaker, Dr. Kencana Sari, SKM, MPH from the National Research and Innovation Agency, will present understanding child growth in Indonesia, insight from recent research. Her presentation will enhance our understanding of the current status and determinant of child growth in Indonesia based on recent scientific evidence. Distinguished guests and participants, we hope that this webinar will serve not only as a platform for knowledge exchange, but also as an opportunity to strengthen collaboration among researchers, academics, government institutions, professional organizations, and other stakeholders in advancing nutrition science and improving child growth outcomes in Indonesia. On behalf of the Research Center for Public Health and Nutrition, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to our distinguished speaker, moderator, organizing committee members, and all participants for their valuable contribution and active engagement in this event. May this webinar inspire new ideas, foster meaningful collaboration, and contribute to advancing evidence-based nutrition science for the benefit of children throughout Indonesia. Thank you very much for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Mohon izin Ibu untuk tetap berada di tempat. Ladies and gentlemen, next is Sumber presentation. We would like to invite the presenter sendiri, Dr. Umi Farida and Profesor Daniel Butman to join Dr. Wahyu in the Sumber presentation. Untuk penyerahan souvenir Ibu. Ya. This is for salam BRIN. Please do salam BRIN like this. Put your hands like this. Silakan. Yes. Dan kita akan melakukan tes foto bersama dengan seluruh peserta. Silakan untuk bisa berdiri di sini, Bu. Bagi Bapak Ibu, silakan untuk bisa berdiri dan bergabung untuk foto bersama. Silakan para fotografer bisa mengambil dari Bu. Ya, silakan para fotografer bisa bergabung, berdiri dan bergabung. Harapannya cuma satu, semoga terlihat. Oke, saya akan satu, dua, tiga, one, two, three. One, two, three. Next, we are going to do once again salam green like this. Put your hands like this. Okay. Okay. One, two, three. Once again, ladies and gentlemen. One, two, three. Now, three. You do any any style you. Hey, hey, goodness. Right, on my count. One, two, three. Once again, ladies and gentlemen. One, two, three. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This is because she is engaged to another event in Tampere and she will lead the event once again where once again thank you very much Dr. Wahyu. Terima kasih Dr. Wahyu sudah menyempatkan hadir dan beliau akan meninggalkan ruangan karena harus melanjutkan acara yang ditunggu di Tamrin. Terima kasih Dr. Wahyu sekali lagi. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're entering the presentation and discussion session. And to lead this session is Honorable Dr. Dia Epasari Fatima. Dr. Dia, please take your seat. And let me read some of her credentials and CV. Dr. Dia Epasari Fatima, MPH, PH. Currently, she is, of course, a researcher with the National Research and Innovation Agency Indonesia from 2025 until today. And then she got scholarship recipient in Prime Indonesia Endowment Fund for Education 2016. And then these are selected publications. And the second time is yours.
Thank you, Mr. MC. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, Prof. Indi Damayanti, the head of Organizational Research for Health, and Dr. Wahyu Puji Nugraheni, the head of Research Center for Public Health and Nutrition. Esteemed speakers, Prof. Daniel Hoffman, Dr. Kencana Sari, and Dr. Umi Fahmida, which I will be calling to the stage shortly. Participants here in this room and online, all around the world. Welcome to the 2026 National Webinar theme From Evidence to Action, Rethinking Nutrition Science for Child Growth. My name is Eva Sari, and I'm very honored to be your moderators in today's event. Today, we bring together the leading global experts to discuss critical advancements in nutritional science for child growth. This is a very critical issues we are facing in this world today. It contributes not only to our literal survival, but also on how we thrive in life. Especially for Indonesians, this is also very relevant because the discussion surrounding the free nutritious meals has been in our daily conversations. So without further ado, let me call to the stage our first speaker, Dr. Kencana Sari, SKM, MPH. Please join me in welcoming her to the stage. Dr. Kencana Sari, welcome. And maybe please a round of applause to her. Thank you. Our second speaker is Dr. Insinyur Umi Fahmida, MSc. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Umi Fahmida. Dr. Umi, the stage is yours. Yes. And last but not least, we have Professor Daniel Hoffman, PhD, as our third speaker. Please welcome to the stage, Professor Daniel Hoffman. Before we officially begin, I would like to mention to you 3 housekeeping rules that we need to obey for today's session so that it runs smoothly. Number 1, please keep your microphone muted during the whole presentations. Number 2, you can submit your questions in the chat box at any time, and the committee will select and provide it to us later on after all the presentations has already been presented. And thirdly, please note that this session is being recorded for educational purposes. So, without further ado, to kick off our event, it's my privilege to invite our first speaker, Dr. Kencana Sari, SKM MPH, to deliver her presentation entitled Understanding Child Growth in Indonesia, Insights from Recent Research. Dr. Kencana Sari is a researcher in Research Centers for Public Health and Nutrition here at BRIN. And this is one of the 83 research centers at BRIN. And she has spent several years researching nutritional science, especially among teenagers. A recent publication is looking at the effectiveness of a mobile application for monitoring nutritional status and growth of adolescent girls for stunting prevention. He is a graduate of two esteemed universities, both here in Indonesia and in the US, the University of Indonesia as well as the Emory University in Georgia, United States. Dr. Pancarasani, you have 20 minutes for your presentation, and I'll provide you with gentle reminders when the time is almost up. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eva, our moderators. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, thank you for joining today's webinar. And it's an honor to be here with our teachers, Ibu Umi, and also Prof. Daniel. Welcome to the National Research and Innovation Agency here in Cibinong. Today, I would like to share with you insights from several recent studies on child growth in Indonesia. Are we waiting for the slide, please? And I will take you through a journey of childhood, child growth from infancy through early childhood and into adolescence. Next. Yeah. The central question that motivates this presentation is actually quite simple. When does growth faltering begin? Is recovery possible, and when does it occur? Because if we want to reduce malnutrition, especially stunting, first we need to understand when children begin falling behind and whether recovery is still possible once growth deficit emerge. The evidence I will present today comes from longitudinal research conducted in Bogor between 2012 and 2019, national survey analysis, and a review of secular growth trends. Next. Okay, let me begin with broader context. Indonesia has made important progress in reducing stunting. According to the most recent national survey, stunting prevalence declined from 27.7% in 2019 to 19.8% in 2024. This is encouraging. However, Indonesia's national target is for 14.2% by 2029. To reach that goal, progress must accelerate substantially over the next 5 years. But beyond the numbers, I think it is important to remember that growth is not simply about height. The child growth trajectory reflects much more than physical development. It reflects nutrition, health, caregiving, environmental condition, and access to opportunity. And the consequence extend far beyond childhood. Growth deficit established during the first years of life can influence cognitive development, educational attainment, productivity in adulthood, and even health outcome in the next generation. And this is why understanding the timing and the dynamics of child growth is so important. Next. Before moving forward, let me briefly explain the three questions guiding today's presentation. Yeah. First, when does growth faltering begin? The second, can children recover through catch-up growth? And then the third, what happened after early childhood? Do children eventually catch up, or do growth deficit persist throughout adolescence? Next. Let's begin with the first question. When does growth faltering actually begin? Next. The longitudinal evidence suggests that the process starts early. The first study was to identify when growth deceleration first occurred. This study followed 408 children from the Bogor longitudinal study on child growth and development, aged between birth until 24 months. Next. Next. The finding was striking. We observed a continuous decline in length for age Z-score from the birth through approximately 18 months. The most pronounced decline occurred during the first 6 months of life. And perhaps most importantly, half of the children had already begun experiencing growth deceleration before reaching 9 months of age. This finding carries an important message that by the time stunting is diagnosed, growth deficit may already been accumulating for many months before. In other words, if we wait until stunting becomes visible, we may already late. The implication is that growth monitoring systems should focus not only identifying stunting, but also on detecting growth faltering before children across the stunting threshold. The next question is, what happens after growth faltering begins? Do children remain stunted or they can move in or out of stunting status? Our longitudinal findings show that stunting is not a static condition. Children's growth trajectory can change over time. However, recovery is far from guaranteed. Nearly 40% of children who are stunted at the age of 12 remain stunted throughout the follow-up period until 5 years of age. Only around 30% recovered and remain not stunted. Another important finding is half of the children who eventually become stunted at the age of 12 months have already entered the pathway by 6 months of age. And among children who were initially non-stunted at the age of 12 months, the period between 12 and 24 months represent the highest risk period for new stunting onset. Next. So this is an illustration on what happened to children who experience growth faltering. Growth faltering is often viewed simply as decline in child height for age. However, it actually represents a much broader development process with consequences that can extend throughout the life course. As shown in this framework, growth faltering typically begins very early in life, often within the first month after birth. During this period, children start to deviate from their optimal growth trajectory. Importantly, not all children follow the same pathway. At the point number 2, some children experience recovery and achieve catch-up growth. Others continue to experience persistent growth deficit and eventually become stunted. The consequences are not limited to physical growth. During childhood, growth faltering may be associated with poorer nutritional status, increased susceptibility to infection, impaired cognitive development, and lower school performance. Picture point 4 shows that this effect can persist into adulthood. Individuals who experience growth faltering early in life are more likely to have shorter adult stature, lower cognitive capacity, reduced productivity and earning, and an increase in risk of non-communicable disease in later life. Perhaps more importantly, like shows in figure point number 5, the effect may extend across generation. A girl who experiences growth faltering is more likely to become shorter adult woman, which may increase the risk of adverse pregnancy outcome and poor fetal growth. As a result, the next generation may begin life at disadvantage, perpetuating an intergenerational cycle of growth failure. Therefore, growth faltering is not about hate today. It shapes the future of individuals, family, and nations. Next, this brings us to the next question. Can children recover? Next, the answer is quite encouraging. Actually, yes, catch-up growth is possible. So the study is using multiple indicators, including head age Z-score, head age difference, and recovery from stunting indicators. We observe evidence of catch-up growth among children between 12 and 60 months of age. We found clear evidence that catch-up growth can occur. While depending on the indicator used, the incidence of catch-up growth range from approximately 20 to 77 events per 100% years. Interestingly, the highest likelihood of recovery was observed during earlier follow-up periods, particularly between 12 and 24 months of age. This finding indicates that child growth remains dynamic. Some children can partially or fully recover from early growth deficit, but it needs appropriate nutritional and environmental support. Next. Yeah, this picture show that answer the most practical one maybe for policymaker and practitioners. When does recovery occur? The evidence point very clearly to one period, which is 12 to 24 months for those who started at the age of 12. This is where we observe the greatest acceleration in growth and the highest likelihood of recovery. After 24 months, the opportunity for catch-up growth declined substantially. And after 36 months, growth trajectory become increasingly stable. The ability to compensate for earlier deficit become much more limited. This finding reinforced the importance of the first 1,000 of days. Now, not because recovery becomes impossible afterward, but because recovery becomes progressively harder. Next. We also examined the factors associated with successful catch-up growth. The first was energy intake. Children consuming at least 70% of their recommended dietary allowance were nearly twice as likely to achieve catch-up growth from stunted to be not stunted. The second was maternal height. Children born to mother taller than 150 centimeters had significantly greater probabilities of recovery across multiple age groups. This finding reminds us that the child growth is influenced by biological, nutritional, and also intergenerational factors. Improving child growth therefore requires action both before and also after birth. Next, let us move beyond the first 5 years of life. Stunting theory suggests that children who fall behind during infancy, may have second opportunity of catch up during puberty or adolescence. But unfortunately, this window of opportunity doesn't seem to be happening in Indonesia. Using national data from 2007 to 2018, Riskesdas, we compare the average height of Indonesian children aged 5 to 19 years against the WHO growth reference. The results were remarkably consistent with the previous result in younger age group. Children who were already shorter than the WHO median at age 5 tended to remain behind as they grew older. In many cases, the gap widened rather than narrowed. We can see in the graph that the gap widened as the children get older. Next, what does it mean that? This means that the deficit, next. The growth deficit established early in life often persists throughout the childhood or even adolescence. Time alone doesn't automatically solve the problem. So we have to do something to overcome this. Next. This analysis also revealed clear socioeconomic inequalities. Children from wealthier households were consistently taller than children from poorer households. Importantly, these differences were already visible by the age of 5. This suggests that inequality in growth emerged early and remained visible throughout adolescence. In other words, growth reflects not only biology, but also social and economic conditions. Next, I would like to address the question that often arises. Are Indonesian children simply genetically shorter? The evidence shows otherwise. To explore this question, we look at secular trend in population height. Secular trends refer to long-term changes in average height across generations. So this is the sample of Japan and South Korea, which provide powerful example. Both Japan and Korea, following period of rapid economic social development after the World War and Korean War, there's improvement in nutrition, healthcare, sanitation, and education that led to substantial increase in average population height. South Korea, in particular, achieved remarkable gain, 5 centimeter until 5.7 centimeter within 60 years, surpassed Japan in average height within generation, which is 70 years. Today, South Korea's male is the highest nation in Asia. Indonesia also experienced improvement. However, the pace has been so slow. The increase is only 4.3 until 4.6 centimeter over 146 years. Importantly, Indonesia's secular growth trend has not flattened. It means that substantial growth potential remain unrealized. This experience demonstrates that population height is highly responsive to environmental condition, not only genetic. Next. So actually, height is reflect cumulative investment in nutrition, health, and social development. Height is therefore not simply a reflection of genetics. Next. So allow me to conclude with several key messages. The first, growth halting begins much earlier than many people assume. For many children in Indonesia, the process starts before 9 months of age. Second, stunting can persist to many years once it is established. The third, catch-up growth is possible, but the opportunities for recovery narrow considerably after 24 months. Fourth, preventing growth faltering is generally more effective than attempting to reverse it later. And finally, child growth is shaped by a complex interaction of nutrition, maternal health, healthcare access, socioeconomic condition, and the broader environment. Next. So the evidence points to 5 priorities. We need to start earlier, beginning before conception and throughout pregnancy. We need to act faster by identifying growth faltering before stunting occurs. And we need to think holistically, integrating nutrition with healthcare, sanitation, education, and social protection. We need also to continue supporting children who already stunted because recovery remains possible, although it's not easy. And finally, we need to focus on growth trajectory over time rather than relying solely on a single measurement of stunting status. Maybe one final thought, children growth in Indonesia is not destiny. It's not destiny. It is the cumulative result of decision, investment, and opportunity that shape children's life from the very beginning. The evidence tells us the window of opportunity opens. It also tells us when that window begins to close. Our responsibility is to act while that window remains open. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Just in time. That's great. Thank you, Dr. Kencana Sari. for a very excellent presentation. So from Dr. Kencana Sari, we learned that growth faltering starts actually very early, even before baby is being born. And also that stunting affects not only height, but also the trajectory of the person socioeconomically, as well as the potential of income and also health, even the risk for acquiring non-communicable diseases. This is very interesting point. And also the good thing is that catch up is possible, yeah, okay. Catch up is possible that when the goal period is between 12 and 24 months, even though there is evidence that this is also the case for 5 and 19 years old, but that's not happening in Indonesia, unfortunately. But we can see maybe there's other factors that can play a role that the audience here and online can do and explore some research about that. And lastly, the message from Dr. Kencana Sari is that let's prevent, not only treat, but let's prevent and intervene holistically, not only from the nutritious side, but also from healthcare, as well as from socioeconomic policy. Yeah. Thanks again, Dr. Kencana Sari. And let's move on to our second agenda. The second presentation is titled Innovative Evidence-Based Approaches for Improving Child Growth in Indonesia. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our second esteemed speaker, Dr. Insinyur Umi Fahmida, MSc. Dr. Umi Fahmida, the floor is yours. Dr. Umi Fahmida is a professor at University of Indonesia. And she is also a senior researcher at Siamio Recfor, which stands for the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization Regional Center for Food and Nutrition. This is quite a mouthful, yeah, Doctor. And she has spent many years researching diet modeling, association between genetics and nutrition, which has been mentioned also by Dr. Kencana Sari earlier, and also the role of nutrition in infant and child growth. Dr. Pamida, you have also 20 minutes, and then the podium is yours. Thank you, Dr. Rumi.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for BRIN, our Public Nutrition and Public Health Research Center, for having me in this very interesting topic webinar. I was requested to share about innovative evidence-based approaches for improving child growth in Indonesia. I believe there are quite some innovative approaches in addressing child growth and stunting. Allow me to share two of those things that we are currently doing in our work. Okay, slide. Okay, so those two approaches I would like to share in this forum is on diet modeling and a whole child approach. So those two are the one that we have been doing diet modeling since 2005, and whole child approach from our study in 2019. Next slide. So with our colleagues in Simeo Recfon, I think also some of colleagues here have been working with us on the use of diet modeling, particularly OptiFood. And this is to share from a public health perspective, community nutrition perspective, that the use of diet modeling has been actually quite a useful approach for shifting how we look into nutrition specific. First, we usually look into nutrient associated with something as likely the same types, nutrients, maybe protein, maybe zinc. But actually, later we will see that often areas with the same prevalence to something may have different problem nutrients. And that's what diet modeling can show. We also already start with diet modeling, look into beyond total protein or total nutrient intake into more on quality, protein quality and bioavailable nutrients. And we are also would like to share that perhaps we would be more paying attention how we make use of this approach to combine nutrient-dense food on making food multi-mix given the risks of less managed of fortification, if not for supplementation. Yeah. So next slide. So briefly about the diet modeling, it is basically combining information from dietary data where we will have the food list, food availability, the food pattern like frequency, consumption per week, and also the food cost. And with the OptiFood, basically we are trying to find combination that will meet as much as possible the RNI, the nutrient requirement, and then test the robustness by minimizing each nutrient to ensure that it is still meeting adequacy across nutrients estimated as the estimated average requirement or EAR around 65 to 70% of RNI. But in most cases, this will not happen, and that will lead us to identify nutrient-dense food that we can highlight more in our guidelines. So this helps to make the guideline more able to specify what are locally available nutrient-dense food that can be highlighted in addition to just a generic message. Slide. Yeah. This is to show that in our recent work, this is also supported by our colleagues from Poltekkes and universities in Indonesia with the support of MOH and GAIN, that when we see the number of problem nutrient across the 37 stunting priority district in Indonesia, they are not the same. Some only have one problem nutrient, some two or three, and some even more. And while the typical is iron, zinc, calcium, and folate, some other areas have much more problem nutrient, especially in the Eastern Indonesia than the Western Indonesia. So this is really showing us that the stunting in public health prevalence may not always be associated with the same problem nutrient. It is more because of the food pattern and perhaps food availability. Next. And so we have evidence in the previous work, this is a study funded by the MOH, where we have intervention with complementary feeding recommendations developed with the LP OptiFood and with a trial in East Java, Malang, and also West Kalimantan, Sambas. And we find something interesting that while we know, as Dr. Kencana already mentioned, this is the period where something increased, yeah, but the increase is becomes less, much less in the area with the same with the intervention where the animal to plant protein ratio is about 3 as compared to when there is an increase in intake, but the animal to plant protein ratio remains around 1. Next. And we also see that while intake of nutrient is important, most of the time we overlook the fact that while it is consumed, it may not be directly translated into utilized nutrients. So bioavailability is important. This is a study that just completed recently where in East Nusa Tenggara, where we see that corn, for example, only meet the desirable bioavailability for iron. The germinated corn will then make it more bioavailable for zinc, which is not before it is germinated. While you can see here, if you compare anchovy, like one example of animal source food, is more bioavailable for all iron, zinc, and calcium. So, slide. Okay. So that simple processing, like we know, like soaking or germinating, can simply help the same type of food to be more bioavailable. And with that, further information on how we can combine those better, more bioavailable nutrient food, we can make use also the information from life modeling to identify the nutrient gap and input that, like if you put combined with the LP in the survey, for example, we would be able to make a combination of food multi-mix, which will rely less on the use of fortificant. Next. Right? Yes. Next. Okay, so a little bit about what is the food multi-mix, because most of the time we think like after the diet is still inadequate, think about the fortification and different very extreme situation, think about supplementation. So I would like to share here what we can do with using food multi-mix, combination of locally available nutrient-dense food, using some pre-treatment to make it more bioavailable. And in this example, of study also in Malang, Istiafa, dan Mbak Ibu Wirawan, we can actually address not only adequacy of nutrients, but also amino acids like cysteine, which we found in this case control study of stunted and non-stunted, but all the invested children in Istiafa. And next. And this work makes use of the nutrient gap identified through food, and then make use of the locally available protein source food. Many of us know like coffee and buncis batik in Indonesia, but they are soaked to make it more bioavailable, because soak happens to be similar bioavailable compared to germination, we study found. And then fish, small fish with bone, wader ya in Indonesia, as well as milk. This Malang also a good big producers of milk, which is made into third. And what drives this design of food multi-mix is that we identified that intake of nutrients are comparable across stunted and non-stunted children. Only ratio of animal to plant protein is different. So that is the reason why we in our formulation aim to make sure that the animal to plant protein ratio is at least 4. And the result, the CFR, complementary feeding recommendation, and food multi-mix can fulfill not only micronutrients, but also amino acid requirement. Yeah. So this study done in Myanmar, not in Indonesia, but our students in Indonesia, shows what can happen when supplementation is done without optimized diet. As you can see there, this study compared the effect of iron supplementation with or without complementary feeding recommendations on micronutrient status, hemoglobin, iron status, linear growth in that microbiota compositions. And as you can see there, complementary feeding will benefit the hemoglobin, but less on iron deficiency or iron indicator as we expect. However, when we look into the iron alone group on the linear stunting risk, it lead to a higher increase in the odds of stunting when the iron is given without optimizing the diet. We understand this might due to the interaction with zinc, potentially a type 2 nutrients that determines also contributes to stunting. And this is also an evidence showing how important it is to pay attention on the ratio of also inorganic to organic minerals. Right. Okay. So that is some of our evidence we like to share on the use of diet modeling. In the second part, I would like to also share about what we have done in our recent cohort initiated in 2021, Action Against Stunting Hub. This is funded by UTFI Global Challenges Research Fund. And similar to what Ibu Kencana mentioned, stunting is complex, and so the ISH study embraced the approach of whole child approach, where we see it is not only the child biology, the physical upstream of nutrition, gut health, microbiome, epigenetic, but also the wider home environment, and also even wider environment, food and education system. Here in the study, we found that while we combine all this cohort of over 600 children from 0 to 24 months, we see this pattern in jet score. So you see, in general, the mean is already less than -2 when it is 18 months. Yeah. However, when we go further, actually, it's also in line with Ibu Kencana mentioned. Some children remain stable above -2. Some children started as -2 at birth, yeah, 25%, but managed to catch up at 3 months during the period of feeding or exclusive breastfeeding. However, soon after the exclusive breastfeeding period, they start to decline. So here we see that there is an early onset of stunting. This uh, first group, the late onset of stunting, the one in green, started not stunted at birth, but become stunted later. And then there are children who are really very good, never stunted, the blue, and the one who recovered managed to improve. And all this give us a different type of stunting typology, which will require us to look into carefully of the determinants behind. Right. So the way we look is that through layer by layer, based on the biological cascade. In community nutrition, in public health perspective, we usually start with looking into the environment, the poverty, the diet, the sanitation. Let's look into the evidence. So beside the cohort study in Action Against Stunting Hub, we also have match case control of 150 pairs of stunted and non-stunted children aged 18 to 23 months. And they're really matched by sex and age and by village, so that we try to remove potential confounders as much as possible. And the study found as the determinants of stunting based on the public health indicators are 3, which are maternal short stature. I'm glad it has been mentioned. 2.6 times risk multiplier when the mother is short. The second one is maternal psychological distress, bring 1 to 9, nearly 2 times risk multiplier of becoming stunting. And the absence of household livestock as a proxy of economic vulnerability, which brings also nearly 2 times risk. And this brings us to the whole child ecosystem model, where the vulnerability can start with the outer ring, like socioeconomic related, may also then go to the closer ring, this is the mother's mental health, and ultimately to the child's biology. So let's into more the outer ring first, the economy. The outer ring here in our ISH, we have a study on the use of multi-criteria decision analysis, MCDA, where we combine protein sources in terms of not only nutritional adequacy, but also like affordability, desirability, freshness, hygiene, ease of preparation. All those criteria are the one mentioned by the stakeholder, not decided by the researchers. And as you can see here, when you compare combination, not only egg, but also egg plus liver plus tofu, only then we can meet a adequacy threshold of 0.9. This suggests, right, that we might need to rethink the way we support for strengthening the protein quality, especially of the poor families. Currently, maybe we are very familiar with the very highlight on eggs as the key nutrients. Yeah, actually in ISH study, we also look into egg intervention for pregnant mothers in Indonesia and also complementary feeding in India. But this study suggests that we need to complement with diverse animal source food and also protein source food. In this case, egg would be much better if combined with some like liver or small fish with bone. Then that will make it more meeting the nutrient requirement. Next. In terms of food environment, the study used the fish as a highlight because we know we are surrounded by the fish and the study area is Lombok, which is also surrounded by the fish. Very interesting that nowadays mobile vendors are really much relied upon by the mothers. And however, despite high high desirability of fish, there is still a constraint on the affordability. And this brings us to highlight, in addition to another study showing that simply having high density, high availability of fish doesn't always lead to high consumption. Lead us to really pay attention to the informal market like mobile vendors, because if you want the access to improve, you also need to address this informal market. So,
Forgive me, Dr. Hudi, we have 2 minutes left. Thank you.
and in terms of value change, we also identify the fish chain increase the risk as soon as they start to enter the wet market. Right. Because like a slight transition is a bit delayed apology for that time. Yeah, and I will be quick, and that is actually suggesting, informing us that we need to pay attention on the cold chain and hygiene of these mobile phones. So going now to the biology, slide please. Yeah, before that biology, just again to highlight one aspect that in another study we see, we noticed that the maternal depression is also important, and we identified that some type of dietary patterns are associated with higher risk and another type with a lower risk of maternal stress, which is already associated with stunting. Now let's go to the level on the gut and blood. This is a finding from the cohort study. Right. And we are looking into the EED, which is environmental enteric dysfunction slide, where we found that as we do not find direct association between poor gut health, but there is an indirect association through the immune activation of CD14 and growth signaling or IGF-1 pathways. I think you can see here clearly that the step is the gut turn on the alarm of immune function, and this disrupt the growth hormone, that may be also clearer in the next slide, where the systemic inflammation is like making a blockade, of the growth hormone so that it cannot nourish the growth adequately. It's like the water cannot fully nourish water the plants.
My apologies, Dr. Hudi, your time is up. Please wrap up. Thank you.
So the same finding with the microbiome, we just go straight, showing that the determinants is mainly breastfeeding. Two slides. Yeah, and we found the determinants of a potential a microbiome related to the breastfeeding and the stunting. And then later we will go further into doing more into the epigenetic. This is still under analysis. Right. And looking into more parentals, mothers and fathers, which that we also collect, so that later on we will combine all this information on nutrition, gut health, parasite, stress, and also epigenetic into looking into growth, cognitions, and so the take-home message supporting that stunting is dynamic not started. There is a silent gut link to growth through the systemic immune. And the holistic whole child approach is important to consider, while the use of the diet modeling is important to translate nutrient to be more utilized by the body. And recommendation for the next way forward is to both make use of this diet modeling approach and also whole child approach targeting the environment, the mothers, and also the child biology. With that, I thank you for your attention. Apology for a slight delay because of that slide. Thank you very much for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Umi, for the excellent presentation. From Dr. Umi, we learn deeper, more detailed regarding the role of nutrition in growth of child and infant. Dr. Umi mentioned that it's not only uh, it's not it's not only nutrients, but it has to be specific because each of child and each of the region in Indonesia might experience different nutrient deficiencies. So it's not one size for all, yeah, Dr. Umi. And also, Dr. Umi mentioned that the importance of using a locally available food and explore how it can be used to also support improvement in addressing stunting issues. And Dr. Umi also mentioned several research that I would encourage the audience here and also online to ask questions further because of the limited time, it was not discussed in very detail. So I'll give the opportunities for the audience to ask later on after the last presentation. And last but not least, let me call to the podium Professor Daniel Hoffman, PhD. Please give round of applause for Professor Daniel Hoffman. Professor Daniel Hoffman is a professor at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, and he will deliver a presentation entitled Managing the Triple Burden of Malnutrition, the Global Strategies. Professor Hoffman has spent many years researching economic development and dietary intake, stunting and health retardation, energy metabolism, and body composition, among others. Professor Hoffman, you have also 20 minutes for your presentation, and the podium is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Selamat pagi. Thank you very much. Terima kasih. It's a great honor and privilege, and I would like to thank all of the organizers who have put a lot of time and effort into this seminar, and also to the participants who are both here in person and virtually. So it's a great pleasure to be here, and I think we have had very coordinated seminars even without prior planning. So what I'm going to expand on are some of these more intricate issues and how stunting and health can influence health, and also what are some strategic strategies and possible plans that can be used to prevent the triple burden of malnutrition. Well, okay, next slide, please. So the brief overview, what I will do is give some definition of epidemiology of both the double and triple burden of malnutrition, the role of stunting the triple burden, existing programs and initiatives, and possible strategic programs and initiatives. Next, please. So the definition of the triple burden of malnutrition, as we've heard, is when you have a high prevalence of stunting, as well as a high prevalence of overweight, obesity, and a high prevalence of micronutrient deficiencies such as anemia. And the small graphic shows that in Asia, because of the large population, you have about 53% of children who are stunted, about 70% who are experiencing wasting, and almost 50% who have some form of overweight or obesity. Next slide. And when we look globally, the numbers are even more dramatic. Now, right now, we have almost 2 billion adults who are overweight or obese, and the main problem with that are the associated metabolic disorders, such as type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and so forth. We also have 264 million women who are affected by anemia. And when we look at overweight, it's about 42 million children. At the same time, 156 million children globally are stunted. And we still have 50 million children globally who are wasted. So this problem is not new, and it is not going away very fast. Now, just as an example, and I want you to focus on the boxes on the right, this is looking at the epidemiology of the double burden in Nepal. What you see are those socioeconomic factors that have been discussed previously are consistent that when you have overweight with undernutrition, it tends to be associated with age. It also has to do with where someone lives, if it's urban or rural, also with the ecological area that they live, as well as education and again, income. So these are not simply dietary problems. These are socioeconomic and sometimes political problems as well. Next, please. Now, when we look broadly in different regions, and this is a complicated slide, but if we look in the Americas, the Mediterranean, Africa, and Southwest and the Pacific Asia, we can see that the influence on double burden, again, is associated primarily with age. But if we look at things like anemia, we can see that it is much more difficult to impact. And so what this is really illustrating is that this is a complex problem that requires complex solutions. Next, please. So just in terms of the etiology, again, as we have heard from the previous speakers, this begins in utero, and it can be intergenerational. So that if we look at the health of the mother during pregnancy, not just in terms of diet, but her nutritional status, as well as exposure to possible toxins, all of those go into play to result in the birth weight of the child. And the lower the birth weight, the more likely that child will grow up to be stunted. But integrated with this is microbiome and consistent dysbiosis in which the child is not able to absorb nutrients well if they are in the right environmental conditions, such as exposed to toxins or infectious diseases, that will drive them to the side of undernutrition. At the same time, with a poor microbiome then being exposed to an obesogenic environment, that can drive them towards overnutrition. And the main problem is that we do have a link between undernutrition and obesity. Next, please. So when we look broadly, we have the triple burden in the center of this slide, but you can see that the influences are quite complex. At the base, generally it is poverty, which is one of the main driving forces. But you also have poor maternal health and education, sanitation and hygiene, general poor growth, the microbiome, but also food access. Surrounding this is the food system. At the same time, we are now seeing a lot of global climate change, which has an additional impact. So again, a complex problem requires complex solutions. Next, please. Now, one of the main things that we often look at is food security, and we've seen some great progress in terms of reducing the prevalence of stunting globally until we had the pandemic. And the pandemic really increased the food insecurity, not just in developing countries, but it also increased food insecurity in the United States as well. And with an increase in food security, that's a marker for general poor access to healthy foods. And we've also seen during this time, while stunting had decreased, we're now starting to see an increase in some regions following the pandemic. Next, please. Now, when we talk about food systems, I use this slide just as an example because we saw some very nice data earlier talking about the ratio of animal. Thank you, Namira. We saw some very interesting data on the ratio of animal to plant-based proteins. Now, if we look at this slide in which participants one of two diets, either a plant-based diet or an animal-based diet, we can see there was a very significant impact on the microbiome, creating a healthier microbiome when consuming a plant-based diet, most likely due to the higher fiber content. But when they were transitioned to the animal protein, we can see a reduction in the microbiome. So again, this is reflecting ultra-processed foods, which are generally low in fiber. So it is important to look at the overall food system in which we are operating. Next, please. Now, I would encourage you to take the reference from this slide. It's in the PNAS from 2022. It was an excellent study conducted in 4 different countries in both Asia and Africa, looking at climate and child growth. And the main result from this slide is to show that mothers who were working in extreme heat delivered babies who were both smaller and less healthy. And I won't go into too much detail, but this study also looked at protein expression in the placenta. And it found that women who were working during the hottest times of the year had a reduction of protein, which was influencing the growth of the child. So climate change is just one additional factor above food systems and other factors which promote growth. Next, please. In terms of stunting, we know that stunting is a complex problem with multifactorial causes, but it is also a marker for social and economic conditions. But most of my research has also shown that stunting is a biological adaptation for survival. And one of the main challenges with stunting is identifying and monitoring the condition, especially in communities that have a high prevalence of growth retardation. So that if you have a community that is generally stunted, it will be more difficult for the families to identify a child who is short because everyone in the community is already short. Workers become an important role. Next, please. Now, I do want to highlight one factor, which is we are talking about stunting. But I want to raise an issue that stunting is a somewhat arbitrary cutoff using the -2 in height for age Z. So if you look at the child on the left of the picture who is defined as stunted, having a height for age Z below -2, she has been exposed to many different problems, such as inadequate diet, infectious diseases, environmental toxins, poor sanitation, perhaps preconceptual health of the parents, and so forth. Yet the child in the middle is not stunted. She has a height for age Z of about -1.9, but she has also been exposed to the same conditions, but did not fall below that cutoff. So she is generally as unhealthy as a stunted child simply because she has experienced growth restriction. Then we have a child on the right who is close to the cutoff. She is at about a 0, but she may have been exposed to a few of these factors. So again, I think we have to look at what are the specific determinants. And I think it was very interesting to hear that in regions of Indonesia, you are seeing different nutrients playing different roles, which I think highlights that how we approach the problem has to really be very specific. Next, please. At the same time, there are some very concrete factors that can influence stunting. This slide shows that the more often a child experiences diarrhea, the more likely they will become stunted. So the question would be, how do we prevent persistent diarrhea in some communities? And again, that may be sanitation, but we do know that diarrhea has a profound effect on intestinal absorption. And that's one of the main factors that we should consider. Next, please. Now, most of my research began after this paper that showed that a stunted child is more likely to be obese in adulthood. And this was a very confusing observation at the time, since stunting is associated with poverty, but obesity tends to be associated more with wealth. So a lot of questions were raised as far as why would stunting be associated with obesity? Next slide, please. That study was in 1995, primarily in those four countries. But then this study from 2009 from the Middle East also found that the degree of stunting from mild to severe, that even mild stunting was highly associated with obesity, but the more severely stunted a child was, the higher the risk was of being obese. And this was consistent throughout 5 very specific and different countries in the Middle East. Next, please. So there's a body of research. I've contributed to about 3 of these papers. And what I want to raise your attention to is that we found an association between metabolic adaptations and poor growth. Simply that stunting is associated with a lower rate of fat oxidation. But I want to raise one very particular point, is that most of these studies that are cited were not using stunting. They were using linear growth restriction. So they were perhaps using a height for HC of -1.5. So again, stunting is the most extreme form of growth restriction, but the problems we are talking about apply to children who are experiencing any degree of growth restriction. Next, please. So what does all of this mean for Indonesia? And I do want to say with complete humility, I am not coming here to educate you about your country. I have been here all of 4 weeks over 2 years, so that is my experience. but I do want to share some insight. Next, please. So these are challenges for not just Indonesia, but also for the world. A large proportion of many populations do not meet the minimum dietary diversity. And the challenge with dietary diversity is the more diverse the diet, the greater the intake of micronutrients, and micronutrients may be one of the key drivers of stunting. Second, ultra-processed foods are widely consumed, and this is contributing not only to obesity, but also to micronutrient deficiencies. Next, poverty and food poverty and food prices also limit dietary diversity. And we also have a poor alignment between agriculture production and dietary needs. And children in particular, especially from gestation through the first 1,000 days, are especially vulnerable to any gaps in nutrition or any exposures to environmental problems simply because they are growing very rapidly and they do not always have time to recover. Next, please. So in terms of challenges for Indonesia, we can see here when we look at the intake of ultra-processed foods that about 51% of adults are consuming ultra-processed foods more than 3 times a week. Children are also seeing a very high intake along with sweets as well. And again, these are energy-rich but micronutrient-poor products. Next, please. So in terms of strategies and potential solutions, the fundamental challenge is the complex etiology of the triple burden. We know that there is broad and consistent coordination of programs, and that is very essential, especially in a country as diverse as Indonesia. One of the key factors is aligning programs with the primary determinants of the triple burden. And that's why I think it was very encouraging to hear that they have identified different micronutrients in different regions, which allows them to be more specific. For example, stunting may be caused by environmental, intestinal, or dietary factors. Obesity may be behavioral or dietary, and also linked to the food system. And anemia micronutrient deficiencies may be dietary or intestinal. So there are ways to capture the determinants of all 3 conditions, which will then make the work a little bit easier as opposed to trying to address stunting independently from obesity and independently from anemia. Next, please. So existing strategies, again, focus on the first 1,000 days, which you can see in the graphic, would be from birth through early infancy. There are also school-based programs which allow for an integrated and coordinated impact. Then we also look at how do we influence dietary diversity. And then last, we have policy and healthcare integration. Next, please. So in terms of the first 1,000 days, prioritizing women of conceptual age, pregnant women, infants, and toddlers is one of the best ways to prevent cognitive and physical stunting. Prevention will always be paramount to treatment. We also need to support maternal health, exclusive breastfeeding, and what I believe to be one of the most important factors, because if you saw from the presentation earlier, a lot of the growth restriction begins after 6 months of age when you begin to introduce complementary feeding. So ensuring the consistent and proper timing, as well as nutrient-dense complementary feeding, I believe is one of the most important things we can do to prevent growth restriction. Next, please. School-based programs are also very important. This is where you can begin to distribute supplements of both iron and folic acid for adolescent girls, which can improve their health as they mature into adulthood and then they become pregnant. This is one of the key ways to improve micronutrient deficiencies. The challenge, again, is making sure that these programs are consistent throughout all regions and that they provide sufficient micronutrients, especially for children who are growing rapidly. Next, please. So next, dietary diversity. I think there's a very important mandate that will support the shift from ultra-processed high sugar salt foods and an impact in supporting a return to traditional, local, and seasonal foods, which are much more high in fiber and also micronutrients. So that a dietary diversity that has fruits and vegetables will go a long way in terms of preventing some nutrient deficiencies and may limit obesogenic diets. Next, please. Last, policy and healthcare integration. I believe that strengthening healthcare workers' ability to not only detect early stunting, wasting, and obesity, but also to monitor. This is something that will really be very important, especially as we also begin to advocate for climate-resistant agriculture, looking at the nutritional supply chains. So again, we have community level and a national level policies which can influence future health. Next, please. So as a summary, we can look at strengthening national and dietary health surveys. I have a phrase which says data render a problem visible. So if you don't know what the problem is and you don't know where it is, it's hard to resolve that problem. So within this, I believe it's imperative that we strengthen community data collection and management so that it is much more easy to find out who has a problem and where. I think we have to address undernutrition and micronutrients. This can be done through local food diversification. This would be primary, and if that cannot be accomplished, then we have to look at multiple micronutrient supplementation and also improving, expanding antenatal care to ensure that women are receiving the proper supplementation during pregnancy. In terms of preventing overnutrition, again, dietary diversity will start to shift the diet away from obesogenic towards a higher fiber diet. And again, limiting ultra-processed foods is important. Then leveraging community and national programs such as school meal initiatives and local policy engagement so that everybody is coordinated and working on the same solution. Next, please. So in summary, the triple burden of malnutrition is complex and it requires an equally complex intervention and program. Access and coordination with remote locations is a major barrier, but is one that can be overcome with greater coordination. I believe the globalization of ultra-processed foods remains a challenge across the lifespan, from pre-pregnancy to early childhood to adolescence and adulthood. So improving dietary diversity should be addressed with parallel interventions, such as multiple micronutrient supplements for women of childbearing age, infants, toddlers, and adolescents. But most important, which is why I have it bolded, the interventions must be evidence-based and adequately evaluated on a regular basis. Excellent. So I would like to acknowledge collaborators who have worked with me on some of this research from different countries, as well as funding sources, and terima kasih.
Thank you, Professor Hoffman, for the excellent presentation. So continuing to our theme, Professor Hoffman emphasized about the importance of holistically approaching these problems, not only from nutritional perspective, but also from other etiology that has been identified, including how to maintain the diversity of the food consumed, also to address climate change and then poverty, making sure the food access is continuously available, food sustainability, and also, last but not least, because I can emphasize that everything and anything you do, it has to be evidence-based, as reflected by the research chaired by Dr. Kencana and also Dr. Ubi. And lastly, also, it has to be monitored regularly. It doesn't have to be, it never only the program, but also the monitoring. Okay, thank you very much for all the speakers. Please give them another round of applause. Now, I will open the floor for questions. I will divide them into sessions. The first session will consist of 3 questions. I'll take 2 from the audience here in this room and learn from the audience online. For everybody in this room who wanted to ask question, please raise your hand and please point out who the question is directed to. Mm, okay, go ahead. Ibu Inong, Dr. Inong. Okay, thank you very much for all the speakers for sharing with us. I have several questions for each speaker. Okay, for Ibu Kencana, I would like to ask which indicators actually are most sensitive for detecting catch up growth? Is it height for exit score or recovery from stunting? So which is the most sensitive indicators? Then for Ibu Umi, how can intervention apply to different stunting trajectories? You mentioned about the early onset and then late onset and recovered. Is it um, related to the intervention period? Okay. And then for Prof. Daniel, I want to ask about the causality framework in global strategies for people burden of malnutrition, which causality framework usually used. And then the second, you mentioned about the importance of poor gut health for growth. So, how should the complementary feeding programs adapt with this gut health? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ino, for the questions. Who wants to answer the first? I'll just provide anyone who wants to answer the first.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Inong, for the question. So yes, we use three indicators for ketchup with a Z-score with a different and then recover from something. So as I remember, the most sensitive is the FH different. So, but I forgot the number. Yeah, it's more sensitive to know to measure the recovery from stunted. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ibu Ina, for the questions. From the for growth trajectory, I think the early onset is mostly related with prenatal. So something about the maternal biology. These children are mostly likely due to the maternal uh, optimal practice. While for the late onset, most likely it is due to the environment, complementary feeding, maybe illness or morbidity, and it is also something that means that these two groups suggest the timing. Okay. But to be sure, the earlier is better if you can secure good pregnancy and also good information. Then during complementary feeding, when it will be. Interestingly, it's also the recovered have something to do with probably because we have also done cohort in a more public health settings. Information was received and they change but a bit late. So it is also important that we aim to deliver the information about healthy pregnancy, healthy good complementary feeding, exclusive breastfeeding as early during the pregnancy. And actually, our study in this book also show that this antenatal care usually lack a specific message. They mostly focus on coverage, that lack on specific messages in this area.
Thank you, Dr. Umi.
Okay, thank you. I will answer the second question first. In terms of a framework, I believe that poverty reduction is essential because ultimately a lot of these problems do come down to poverty. But I think aside from that, we also have to really emphasize prenatal care. But then if you back up, what's important for prenatal care is to have healthy women through adolescence become healthy adults. And so if we can improve adolescent health, especially for girls, we can have healthier women, and then the prenatal care becomes more of a guide for them in terms of having a healthier pregnancy. The influence on the microbiome, again, will also have to do with the mother's diet, but also the mode of delivery. Children who are born vaginally compared to cesarean tend to have a healthier microbiome for several years after birth. As long as the complementary feeding is provided at the right time with the proper foods, which would have sufficient fiber, that will then continue to improve the microbiome of the child. Now, the first question, I'm sorry, I forgot what it was. If you could just remind me. Oh, the policy framework.
Etiology, the causality framework, the etiology.
The etiology for the triple burden, it's again, it's several factors coming together. I think we have to look at how is growth being affected by the food system as well as the environment. Because again, looking holistically, it is not one nutrient, it is not just the diet, it is also the exposure to proper sanitation and so forth. Again, a lot of these are markers of poverty.
Thank you very much for all the speakers that answer your question. Do you have a follow-up question, Margarino? That's all. Thank you. Second questions from the audience in this room. Please raise your hand. You can share your question in Indonesia too, if that's more comfortable, and I'll be happy to translate them for you. Thank you. Go ahead, Ibu Suparmi.
Terima kasih Bu Eva. Good morning, Dr. Daniel, and also Ibu Sari. I have two questions. The first question is for Ibu Umi Fahmida. From your previous presentation, you have outlined the result of the research conducted in Sambas and Malang, if I'm not mistaken, that increase of animal protein is it's important to reduce the climate. As currently program in Indonesia, we call it MBK, Bu Umi, ya. MBK is currently enrolled for children, under-5 children, and also for pregnant women. What your views about this here? Because we also have a limited budget for each children, and the animal protein is very important, and how to imbalance between your previous result and the current problem. And do you have any result about cost benefit or how many rupiah per month you will be increased our reduce the spending? This is my first question for me. And second question for Prof. Daniels. You mentioned previously about the strategies to reduce people burden malnutrition, and we in Indonesia already have a sensitive and specific intervention. What is your views about this? Is it enough, or we should expand the intervention currently in Indonesia? And your presentation mentioned about expand the frequency of antenatal care visits. And currently we already expand for the 4 visits into 6 visits. So it's still below the local recommendation. What do you feel, your views about this? Thank you.
Repeat the first question.
Regarding the strategies that has been implemented in Indonesia, do you think it's sufficient? And if you don't think that's sufficient, which part to expand? Am I correct? Yes. Okay.
Great. I think from what I've seen there, these core initiatives are covering a lot of aspects. Um, I think, using information of what we've learned today in terms of specific nutrients, that can help refine these programs. But also it's the evaluation. You can have a program and you can implement it, but you don't know if it's actually successful. And so I think the evaluation of these programs will help you then moderate what can be changed. In terms of, yes, I see that Indonesia has decreased prevalence of stunting. What will be key is to find out how that has happened. What was it that was occurring during the past 10 or 15 years that allowed for the prevalence to decrease? And then to look at what is enough. The global goal is to have undernutrition less than 5% in any country. That's a long way to go. But I think any effort that is reducing it, you have to begin to capitalize on that.
Thank you, Brother Daniel. Maybe I'd like to add specifically, she mentioned about the antenatal care visits, right? Because it was initially 4 times and then currently it is 6 times. Do you think that's enough or do you have other suggestions?
I really don't have an opinion. I think you know that it's enough when you see that it's effective. And, I know there are economic constraints to increase the number of visits. If you can't have more visits, then you may look at what is happening at each visit. What is being emphasized? For many pregnant women, by the time they know they're pregnant, they may be 1 or 2 months into gestation, which is why then going back and improving adolescent health will allow a more healthy mother to get the antenatal care. But I think evaluating what is being shown to be the outcome, and can you modify it? If you can't have more than 6 antenatal visits, how can you improve those visits to then cover these other issues?
Thanks, Daniel. Does that answer your question, Suparmi, or do you have a follow-up question? That's
Yeah, maybe we need to evaluate first, yeah, about antenatal care visits in Indonesia. I think it's 6 is not enough actually, but we still struggling for the BPJS and also about the financial national financial umbrella. So I think we need to take care of think again about the increasing frequency of antenatal care and also imbalance with our fiscal capacity in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Suparmi. It's always about the cost, right? Everywhere resources are always limited. And that's segue nicely into the question for Dr. Umi, right? The question was about cost benefit analysis, whether you've done that and how many rupiahs is needed actually to increase certain amounts that is significant, right? Considered as improvement.
Thank you for the question. Thank you, Sultan. Actually, we have done the analysis of the cost of this optimal diet for school children. Just recently, we can go in again, and we even try whether 45 tries can reduce the cost. We answered even it doesn't really reduce the cost significantly. But the figure falls around like close to what even MOH actually identified like 2017, 2019. It's around 20,000. But yeah, because we also need to make sure that some animal source foods are there. Otherwise, it is not enriching the typical diet which we already put. It is opportunity to deliver as a vehicle for nutrient dense food. So in that work, we also identify what foods actually should be taken as an opportunity to be included in the school meal to make it more elevated from the current existing diet. And another strategy in relation to the ratio is actually, in addition to the ratio, we can think also about be careful about too much for children, because our work is particularly for children. They really need nutrient density. Be careful about the title. So then you might some to some extent increase by controlling the fiber through the pre-processing and making it germinated or soaking. Very simple, traditional method, but it's quite effective in significantly improving bioavailability. So the message is the ratio is important. Animal source food is important. It cannot be replaceable by just fortified rice, for example, and also that pre-treatment, some pre-treatment, simple during the cooking may help to improve the utilization bioavailability. Yeah, so indeed, cost is really important to revisit.
Thank you, Dr. Hopi. Dr. Kencana, would you like to add to that question also regarding the cost benefit? Okay, thank you. Thank you for the audience here in this room. Now I'd like to read one of the questions from the online audience. If it can be shown on the screen, that would be helpful. This question is from Maria Fan. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, Ibu Maria. Okay. So learning from South Korea, the experience of South Korea, what dietary factors and best practices that they've done that can accelerate the effort to reduce the growth gap? Because compared to Indonesia, it is strikingly different. It was an example given by you, right, Dr. Kencana? But feel free for both the other speakers to add on to the discussion.
Okay. Please add anything, okay? So based on the example from South Korea, yes, they mentioned that they consume a lot of protein, especially from the animal protein, the red meat, and also dairy products such as milk or cheese gitu. This is also the same as what happened in the Dutch, yeah, after the colonial, maybe in the 80s or 1945, maybe they have the not that different hate with us Indonesian, like 160 something gitu. But the Dutch is now become the highest nation in the world, yeah, because after they consume a lot of animal protein, including dairy products such as cheese. Yeah, we know that in Holland there are a lot of cheese production, and then also milk, gitu. But unfortunately, the dairy product in Indonesia is very limited. The source we have to, the resources we have to import from other countries just to fulfill our needs.
Thank you, Dr. Kencana. Maybe Professor Hoffman, you mentioned about the microbiome being affected by the perfect combination of animal protein and also plant-based protein. So going into Dr. Kencana's point regarding the importance of animal protein for growth, what do you think the best proportion of animal protein to maintain the microbiome?
I have to apologize. I cannot answer that question. I don't know the exact proportion. Again, that was a short clinical study, and I think there are several questions which can be addressed, because the more you increase animal protein in a diet, you start to decrease fruit and vegetable. And I think if you have a higher animal protein diet, but you have maintained sufficient fruits and vegetables, that will promote fiber intake, which is the key driver of the microbiome. So again, I cannot give you an exact ratio, but
Thank you, Prabhu. So I think this is a interesting point for further research, right? because in one side, Dr. Kanchana mentioned the importance of animal protein, but on the other side, maintaining a balanced microbiome is also important. I think we have time for a second session, second Q&A session. Again, I'm going to open for the audience right here. Oh, okay. Let's go to the online question first. From Ibu Fitra. Can triple burden of malnutrition be improved with socioeconomic improvements? Because from Daniel's slide earlier, there are many factors that cause it. So socioeconomic improvements, can it also improve the triple burden of malnutrition?
I would like to say yes. I'm optimistic. I think if you can improve the socioeconomic conditions of a community, then you can see that their diet can improve. Again, it depends on the quality of the diet. Just increasing income doesn't guarantee that people will eat a more healthy diet. So again, that's why I say a lot of these initiatives have to occur in parallel, because simply providing money to someone doesn't mean that they will go improve their dietary diversity. It doesn't mean that they will use the money to improve their antenatal care. So I think it has to happen in concert with the other factors.
Thank you. I'm going to read the second question. Can you put it up on the screen again, please? Thank you. So from Ibu Novi, in 2012, we analyzed data from the National Health Survey and the Central Statistic Agency, or BPS, to identify high-risk areas and determine the distinguishing factors in case of double burden malnutrition. We found that the dependency ratio was a key distinguishing factor, and nearly all high-risk areas for double burden malnutrition were located outside of Java, the island. So we are in Java. Of course, you're familiar. Okay. And then what are Prof Daniel's thoughts on these findings? How is the concept of demographic factors related to the double burden and triple burden phenomenon?
So if I may, what they're finding, what is, what I'm not familiar with the dependency ratio.
Sure. So, Ibu Novi, if you're still online, would you mind opening your microphone and provide more clarifications?
Thank you, Ms. Daniel. Maybe but my English is very low. Ibu moderator bisa mentranslatekan?
Yes, definitely. Go ahead, Bu.
Yes. We found about the dependency ratio was K is decreasing factor and nearly a rise in area for double burden malnutrition were located outside of Java. How about this finding?
Ibu, mohon maaf. Jadi pertanyaannya tadi mohon dijelaskan lebih lanjut. Yang dimaksud dengan key distinguishing factors-nya itu apa saja gitu ya, supaya lebih jelas. Mungkin nanti saya coba bantu translate.
Ya, jadi yang ditemukan faktor yang membedakan antara daerah yang mengalami double burden dan yang bukan mengalami double burden itu tadi tentang dependency ratio. Dari itu data dari BPS, kemudian faktor ekonomi dan faktor konsumsi.
Mohon maaf Bu Novi, dependensi rasionya mohon bisa dijelaskan lebih lanjut.
Dependensi rasio jadi tentang tentang angka ketergantungan dari penduduk yang produktif, usia produktif terhadap yang tidak produktif.
Okay. Thank you, Bu Novi. Terima kasih, Bu Novi. So it was clear, right? So okay. So dependency ratio is the ratio between the productive population and the non-productive. So Usually it is between 25 to 65, no, 25, right? 25 to 65. Somebody correct me. Productive age, so dependency ratio between the
Usia produktif.
productive age and the
So, okay, so if I interpret it correctly, where there's a higher ratio of non-productive family members, there's a greater prevalence of double burden. Okay. Interesting question. I honestly think I would want to read the paper, but that the non-productive members are those who are not employed and gaining income. Is that correct?
correct.
And there's greater double burden. So I think again that may reflect the poverty situation. That would be my view.
I would agree. I would agree. Does that answer your question, Mudoshi? Or would you like to ask further?
Thank you. Cukup, Ibu.
Is other speakers want to add to that?
Well, let me ask one follow-up question. Are the non-productive members, are they simply part of the informal settings, or are they just, is there no income at all? Is it a difference between formal employment or informal employment?
So the question is whether the non-productive population is strictly between the population who does not have income or the population who is recorded as having a formal employment and non-formal employment is considered as non-productive.
Betul. Nggih, halo?
Ya, Bu,
Betul.
jadi
Nggih.
betul, betul. Jadi yang non-formal itu termasuk non-produktif atau termasuk produktif yang punya pekerjaan informal?
Yang informal termasuk produktif, jadi tergantung pada usia.
Oh, oke.
Ya,
Jadi termasuk,
usia.
so Prof. Hartman, whether they have informal or formal employment, they are productive. Okay, so let's move on to the second section with the Q&A sessions. Let me go to the fourth question in line before I give the opportunity back to the audience here in this room. So from Pakaji, from the evidence, how many percentage of the most success rate when we conduct the intervention during 1,000 days window in between pregnancy and first 2 years? For Hoffman again.
I don't have a specific number for the success rate, but I do know that women who are exposed to multiple micronutrient supplements, especially if they can attain a healthy nutritional status, meaning their weight is sufficient, they tend to do better than if you have an undernourished mother who is given a supplement, because then she is more likely trying to replete her stores, and that's going to take precedence over what is provided to the fetus.
Thank you, Prof. Hoffman. So again, to the audience here in this room, please raise your hand if you have any questions. Yes, please. Please mention your name and whose the question is being directed to.
Thank you. So I'm Nur Edi from BRIN. Yes, I address my question to Professor Daniel Hoffman. The first question is to assess the triple burden of malnutrition in an area, what absolute figures or percentage are used as a benchmark for high prevalence of stunting, high prevalence of overweight or obesity, high prevalence of micronutrient deficiencies? Uh, it's okay. Can I ask question for second question?
Let's do the first one first. I couldn't hear the question well.
Yeah. President Hoffman answer the first question first, and then I'll give you another opportunity to ask the second question. What's your name, Pak? My apologies.
I'm Nur Edi. Nur Edi.
Pak Nur Edi. Ya, jawab pertanyaan pertama ya Pak. Nanti saya berikan kesempatan berikutnya. Okay, so Hoffman, the question is regarding the benchmark to determine high prevalence of the triple burden of disease. What do you consider? How do you consider it is high prevalence for all three?
So for any of the conditions, stunting, overweight, obesity, or anemia, there are established international cutoffs. And for stunting, it's -2 standard deviations. And then we see the same for obesity. Generally, you look, what's it? So, yeah, so then that's, going to provide the prevalent data. So we have these cutoffs, but again, what I wanted to emphasize was if we are approaching this naturally, there are more children who are growth restricted than stunted. And so it's important to focus on stunting, but also not to forget that most children are exposed to the same factors. But I really think, we have the standard cutoffs, which is what most studies are using.
Let me clarify ya Pak. Question, my understanding is that your question is regarding the percentage. So for example, our target for stunting is 14%, right? So what's the benchmark, right? To consider this percentage is high or already.
Again, I think, what we see internationally is if the prevalence of malnutrition can be below 5%, that's considered to be a success. But again, even 5% still means a lot of children suffer from these conditions. So I think the best answer I can give is the lower the better. But getting from 19% to 5% will take a lot of work.
What about obesity and micronutrients deficiency?
Again, micronutrient deficiencies and obesity, the lower the better. And I don't think there's any one number that's going to be sufficient. To say that 15% of girls in Indonesia are anemic is still not good news. So again, if you can reduce from 30% to 15, that's a fantastic reduction. But I would say too, if that can happen, something is working. So the question is how to make it work even better, because as we get to the 5%, what you're seeing is those are the most challenging cases. Those may be the most remote conditions. Those may be poorest people. So it's always, we can talk about catch-up growth. It's almost always easier to reduce from a high prevalence to a slightly lower. What's really challenging is to get from a low to the lowest.
Thank you, Prof. Hoffman. So before going to your second question, I have one question for Dr. Iti. Regarding your research of the 37 areas with different micronutrients deficiency, this is a very interesting findings, in my opinion. My question is whether these findings has been heard in some way by the committee of the pre-nutritious meal program, our MBG national program, and if it has, in what stage is these findings being integrated into the formulation of the menu in those areas? Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Actually, that slide is about the under 5 children, but more recently in 2025, early 2025, we did studies in 12 provinces in Indonesia, representing 6 food system areas of Bappenas. And in each area, we had samples of primary school children, junior and high school children, boys and girls. So represent 7 to 17 years old children. And we have analyzed the data, and we have already developed the optimized food-based recommendation. We also identified quite some gaps and translated into one week MBG menu. By the time I think 2025, we already disseminated with Gain and also Minister of Health, yeah, GPI, yes. I think, but yeah, we have some tenders of KL, but not yet to begin, like this. So hopefully we will continue because more is just recently the book is just been published in SBN. We hope that we can share, and also we are very grateful if BRIN and other colleagues here would also make use of that, because in that work we actually see MBG as an opportunity to deliver not only meal but meal which is nutrient dense, something that rarely consumed and also related to the problem nutrient in the local area. Second is to deliver with nutrition education. And one finding we also identify, the one that we also addressed to the RNI and KG Sports of Indonesia, is that we didn't find iron as problem nutrient in adolescent girls, which is not in line with the anemia prevalence. And we identified that the AKG of our adolescent girls is only half or one third of FAO RNI for iron the same age. So likely it is due to the bioavailability assumption, which we also get some information from the task force. And this is something that needs to be revisited in the current popular AKG.
Thank you so much, Dr. Afi. I'm going to give another opportunity to Bapak Nur Edi for the second question.
Second question, please. From your presentation, one of the existing strategies for the potential solution of TPM is the school-based program. My question is, can you explain the mechanism and management of the school-based program in your country? Perhaps this could be a lesson for a similar program in Indonesia.
Thank you, Pak Nur Edi. That's a great question. Go ahead, Prof.
I will say this with a little a caveat. This is being recorded. But in the United States, we're actually, our current administration is actually minimizing funding for school-based programs, as well as reducing funding for scientific research and constricting academic research to align with the current administration's political policies. That's going to have a very negative impact on the American citizens. So what we have learned is you have to have a program that can survive changes in political systems. During the pandemic, free school meals were available for many children. And almost every research study that looks at childhood nutrition in schools shows that there's improved academic performance, there's improved health, and there's improved nutritional status. The advantage to school-based programs is that you can ensure that every child, since every child has to attend school, that every child has access to key nutrients. And again, the nutrients need to align with sufficient diet. Providing iron to a child who is undernourished has a different effect than a child who is properly nourished. So I think the school-based programs are a perfect avenue because you can reach every child in the country. And so interventions can be implemented much more easily in terms of the logistics, but also the monitoring. So I would say the lesson from our country is if you begin a program that is shown to be successful, that should be enough to continue it. And that it's unfortunate that political systems can look at successful programs and then reverse them. So that would be the lesson from our country.
Thank you. Paano ready? Do you have follow-up questions? Or that's sufficient? Okay. All right. Let me go. Is there any question from the live audience here? We have. Oh, go ahead. I thought there is a question. Okay. We still have 30 minutes, actually. Am I right? The committee, we still have 30 minutes. So we have plenty of time for the next Q&A session. While waiting for the questions from the live audience here, let's bring up questions from online audience. From Ibu Jovita. For Dr. Inu, from your experience in AASH, were there any findings that surprised you and challenged previous assumptions about stunting? That's a really great question. Go ahead, Dr. Umi.
Yeah, one thing that really new, because we rarely address that, is we work with team of psychologists and address maternal stress, depressions, and also we also look into the overall mental health and also social support. And to our surprise, stress is even 80% of the mothers, and these are rural mothers. And around 20, nearly 1 every 4 mothers also have stress. So meaning we probably have been underestimating the care workload of working mothers, and bear in mind this is in rural area. However, there is also a good correlation. The higher the social support they receive, the healthier their mental support. That is the most striking one. The second one, we also identified the selenium deficiency to be very high. This is also very, very rarely overlooked nutrient, and we found it's a lot in both mothers and babies.
Thank you. May I add to that question, Dr. Umi, what about the factor of age? Is older mothers contribute to a higher psychological challenge?
Our recent paper on nutritional and non-nutritional determinants of maternal mental health that this did not find age as a component. Actually, education seems like more thinking is associated with the interest rates. And the other is it will reduce with an adoption of healthier diet pattern, because we identify 5 types of diet pattern, and healthier diet pattern, if it is less followed, is associated with increased risk of either stress or some common mental disorder. And high consumption of sugary foods is increased with depression. We don't know whether it is the cause or it is the effect.
Regarding sugary foods, this is interesting as well. Um, as far as I know, in other countries, in other developed countries, sugary foods are labeled based on their levels, like A, B, C, D, so that it's easier to identify and avoid. Do we have a plan? I mean, is your research team have a plan for this kind of policy? Evidence to support this kind of policy, maybe?
First of all, I would like to appreciate that recently MOH is developing traffic light, labeling. I think very soon, because I was involved in being part of the respondents, to give input like traffic light, high sugar, moderate, and green is okay. So very soon it will be, the plan is it will be required for manufactured foods, but not yet from the informal food. So I think that would be a good step. In our study, actually, yes, we plan to explore more on 2 things. One, on the UPF and dietary. We have NOFA. Actually, some of healthy diet index is really good to monitor, and including NOFA for UPF, and that is something that we want to see. And another one people may have heard is a diet quality, DII, dietary inflammatory index. Yeah, it is more complex, but it is not only about nutrient, it is also about some foods. Some foods maybe like garlic, like turmeric, may also be contributing. And that will help us to identify more what do we have that we appreciate less in our food.
That's a great explanation. Thank you, Dr. Lumi. Maybe Prof. Hoffman or Ibu Kencana wanted to add to that regarding sugary foods traffic lights.
I'm sorry to disagree a little bit. But I think most parents are not going to choose foods based on how much sugar. They're either going to buy the high sugar product or not. And that's why I think promoting traditional foods and fruits and vegetables will displace some of these. Because I really think if you are going to buy a candy bar that has yellow light because it has less sugar than another candy bar, I think the message should be don't buy the candy bar. So I think it can help for people who are already having a sufficient diet, but I think for people who are with an insufficient diet, the traffic lights will be less important.
A different perspective from Hoffman, which is interesting as well, right? So he's afraid that the traffic lights might dilute the messaging. How about you, Dr. Kencana?
I think Indonesia has applied many interventions, right? The main thing that sometimes forget or maybe dikesampingkan apa ya? The education for them. So sometimes we don't realize that the problem is in front of us. Sometimes we think we are normal. We don't have any problem with our nutrition or our food or anything. So this we have to educate them and show them that you are not being good in some way. So whether in your environment, for example, sanitation, or your food environment, something like that, or even your nutritional status. Like, for example, like being 160 is okay. Being 150 is normal for some people in some area. So they don't know even they are something.
Okay. Prof. Hoffman.
I also wanted to add one reminder. One of the key things that people may or may not know, the economist, Professor Amartya Sen, who won the Nobel Prize for Economics, he had a very important study that showed the best way to improve childhood nutritional status is by improving maternal education. And that is a key factor, that you are not increasing the burden on mothers, but that they are arriving at motherhood better educated. And so improving education for girls and women is vitally important.
Thank you, Prof. Hoffman. So emphasize on education, especially education for mothers and potential mothers. Thank you, speakers. Let's move on to the next question from Bapak Andi Salama. This is again for Dr. Umi. From the IISH study findings showing that breastfeeding influences the infant gut microbiome, how can this evidence be translated into practical strategies for stunting prevention? What are the most promising opportunities and challenges in leveraging breastfeeding microbiome interactions to improve child growth outcomes? So we are coming back to microbiome, Dr. Umi.
Thank you, Bapak atau Ibu Andi Salama, for the questions. Our study actually identified only breastfeeding, distinguished, showed a significant difference, not the stunting itself. So, however, we can see from the difference, so to say, microbiome. It is what we identified is that the breastfeeding set a good microbiome ecosystem, and things or microbiota which are a characteristic of breastfed children will actually we can trace about what can be supporting their growth, like the prebiotic foods, and this is something that we can probably explore. And more studies is needed in terms of the longitudinal study to actually see what this microbiota related to breastfeeding will have effect to growth in the long term. So currently we know breastfeeding is associated with growth, but maybe more studies by now exploring more with microbiota data, we will be able to explain the mechanism, and that will be microbiota. In addition, also maybe also the epigenetic is something is associated. What happens with the epigenetic of the respective?
Bit of follow-up question from me, Dr. Umi, if I may. So is the quality of the breastfeeding, the milk, influenced by the nutrition taken by the mother, or any breast feed is sufficient for the babies in those golden times?
Yeah, in ISH study, actually, we analyzed the profile. We had sample of breast milk and analyzed. However, this is still ongoing, so I hope we can provide further information on this. The hypothesis it should be, but some nutrients is quite having homeostasis like zinc. Long time ago, we had study with Vietnamese student, and it doesn't affect, but it is about zinc because it has some homeostasis. Some nutrients probably fat soluble will be highly affected, and we plan to look into those in our studies after we have done the full analysis.
Thank you, Dr. Umi. That's we are looking forward to the result of the research because in general we always suggest breast milk no matter what, but maybe these studies can influence on how to complement the breast milk depending on the nutrition on the food taken by the mothers. We still have around 50. Do you want to add something? Okay. We still have around 8 minutes left. I'll move back to the live audience here in this room. Please raise your hand if you have any question. Okay, let's go back to the online audience questions. From Ibu Jovita, you propose for Prof. Daniel Hoffman. You propose that stunting is not merely a marker of deprivation, but also represent a biological adaptation to environmental stress. How does this perspective change the way we should design interventions, particularly in settings where children are simultaneously exposed to EED, food insecurity, and the double burden of malnutrition? Prof. Hoffman?
Thank you for that question. I think when you consider that stunting is both a marker and an adaptation, you then have to step back and look at the environment. A child who is stunted but is still exposed to undernutrition will not develop the same chronic diseases as a child who is stunted and moves into an obesogenic environment. So if they improve their intestinal system, if they improve food security, but are now being exposed to products that may promote obesity, that's where the risk factor may be higher. So I think it's a question of how are you improving those determinants of stunting, and are they just improving their overall growth, or are they placing them in an environment in which they can then develop some of these other chronic diseases?
The next question is also for you. From Ibu Nazarina, how can a short-statured adolescent adult be distinguished from an individual who experienced stunting, particularly when there is no history of illness during early childhood and the individual demonstrates normal or high cognitive ability? Is short stature, not stunted, considered as a process of evolution? How it is possible?
So being short doesn't necessarily mean that you're unhealthy. I often tell my wife this, that she is shorter than me. But the question is, how short are you? And again, we use stunting as a cutoff to identify those most extreme cases. A child who has a minus 0.5, yes, they're shorter than a healthy population, but they are not at an extreme. And so I think the questions in terms of who is going to be at risk for future problems that risk increases as they get more short. If you remember the data from the Middle East, you can have a child who is mildly stunted and they were twice as likely to be obese. But a child who was severely stunted was 6 or 7 times more likely. So it's the degree of stunting, but I do come back to the point that a child who is not stunted may also be at risk. A child who is at minus 1.8 is not necessarily healthy. They are still, they've experienced something, and they don't necessarily have to have experienced an illness. Having chronic micronutrient deficiencies, you may not see the symptoms of the deficiency, but they may experience the poor growth. So it doesn't always have to be accompanied by some other pathology.
Thank you, Professor. Do you have another question from the online audience, or that is the last? Oh, there's another one. I think we have 3 minutes left. We can go for one more question from Kawayu. Is there any psychological approach that can be done to improve food pattern, feed pattern, or eating pattern for teenagers and adults? Psychological approach.
I'm not really aware of the psychological approach. I think there may be a community approach that for that age group in particular, they're going to eat foods that their friends eat. Nobody wants to be different. And so for a child to take an apple to school as opposed to taking chips, they are going to be singled out. So I think that's why the school programs, everybody is aligned. Everybody will be exposed to the same products. But may I answer the second question?
Yes, sure.
So the second question is, what do you think is the most important missing piece in stunting programs? From what I've seen in different countries, one of the main problems is that they try to take a solution. They may try to say, we need to improve protein intake, but protein may not be the problem. And I really appreciate the slide we saw earlier that showed, depending upon the region, they may be different nutrients that are influencing. So I think the programs have to be aligned with the particular problem. That providing calcium supplements nationally may help one community, but not another where they have sufficient calcium. So I think that's going to be the missing piece, is not addressing the actual determinants of stunting.
Thank you, Prof. Hoffman. The last question, it's very intriguing. I think you'll be happy to answer it. How about the multiple burden of malnutrition in household level, where the mother is overweight and the child is malnourished?
So again, I think that's reflecting the food environment, that a mother may be overweight because they're consuming a high carbohydrate diet. They're consuming a diet that is high in processed foods. And again, if you turn around, the difference between a mother and her adolescent is that the adolescent is still growing rapidly. The two most rapid periods of growth are infancy and adolescence. So while the mother may be sufficient or actually overnourished, the adolescent girl is still growing rapidly. So the same diet is not going to have the same impact on the two women.
Thank you, Prof. Hoffman. So, ladies and gentlemen, due to the time constraint, we've come to have to conclude the Q&A session. Thank you for everyone to have been engaged in the asking the questions and also discussing with the speakers. And also, I would like to thank all the great speakers for the brilliant discussion that we have today. So we have discussed the importance of nutrition for child growth in all aspects, right? We discussed genetics, we discussed socioeconomic, we discussed microbiome, and so on and so forth. And I would hope that this discussion is not the end. I would hope that after this, you'll come down and come up with some ideas to do further research, especially for science researchers here, right? And also to maintain contact with other speakers here. So maybe in the future, we can build together a research that can improve the nutrition of the Indonesian people and all the children in the world for the global audience in Zoom. Again, I'd like to say thank you very much for all the participants, the committee, and also the speakers today. This is the end of the session. I would like to wish you all a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please make a round of applause to our speakers and penerapan tentang secara sari Dr. Bifamida, Ibu Sabina Wapan dan Dr. Nato. Thank you very much. Bapak Ibu yang nanti kami ingatkan sekali lagi untuk mengisi link konferensi yang tertera di Zoom meeting sekali lagi. Kami ingatkan kembali kepada Bapak Ibu untuk mengisi link konferensi di link Zoom yang kedua. Itu panitia akan menampilkan silakan Bapak Ibu scan karena pengambilan sertifikat sekali lagi nanti. Nah, ini dan sudah Bapak silakan untuk di-scan di telepon Bapak Ibu masing-masing untuk pengambilan sertifikat. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a wrap. This is the end of the event. Thank you very much. My name is Samir Apriarsa signing out. Thank you once again for your attention and attendance. Good day and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you. Pada panitia, jangan lupa pada kita bersama dulu. Silakan. Oke, silakan Bapak Ibu makan siang bisa diambil. Makan siang bisa diambil di meja belakang. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih dari sebutnya.
Bapak